Hey everyone, before we get into this week's episode, I have a little announcement. I recently launched the Awesome Finds newsletter. So each week, I'm going to share a few spotlights on creative people and projects, meaningful stories, and new ideas, all with the goal of sparking our imaginations. So sharing's great, but for me, this is more than just sharing. This is about spreading new ideas and happiness. Okay, that may sound a tiny bit cheesy, but it's true because I believe when we're sharing creativity and ideas, that can spread joy and happiness around. At least that's how I see it. I'm also hoping this helps us cut through all the noise that's all over our social feeds lately and makes this kind of discovery a little bit easier. So here's the simple truth of why I'm doing this. I just want to share the great stuff in the world that energizes me to energize you. So if you want to sign up or want more info about it, go to awesomefinds.info. That's awesomefinds.info. awesomefinds.info. And don't worry, I promise it's a short email and a very quick read. It's supposed to be fun and interesting. I really hope you guys like it. Okay, now to the show. Hey everyone, it's Christopher Swan, and welcome to this week's episode of Living Your Journey. Each week, I have this amazing opportunity to chat with people that love what they do in life. They understand their passions and their direction. Maybe it's a career path, or it's the social impact that they're making. It's kind of like they're following their North Star, but they know their story may change, and they understand that they're on a journey every day. On the show today is Dijon Bowen. Dijon is the creative mastermind behind the popular and inspiring Souls of Society, a photography-based community movement. This movement has captured the attention of thousands and connects its participants in a unique way. Similar at first glance to the Humans of New York project, photos and stories are captured of strangers on the street. But this goes a bit further, using storytelling to increase compassion, empathy, and spiritual awareness, making connections within our society. Dijon explains it all, how it started in San Francisco, why this movement matters, the expansion to other cities, and Dijon's hope for souls. In addition, Souls of Society, Dijon also makes films and music, most notably co-founding the band Indigo Keys with a debut album that was just released last year. Dijon shares his depth, spirituality, and meaning that drives his projects and journey. He thoughtfully shares the hows and the whys of his work and what's next for him. Everyone, meet Dijon. Dijon, it's so good to have you on the show. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Chris.
Absolutely. So you know this, I've written this to you and I've told you, I've been following your storytelling, your Souls of Society for a while now. And I've actually been a fan for quite a long time. I think I've reposted a ton of your stuff all over the web. So this is actually really great for me to connect and just kind of talk to you about some of the things that you're doing and just really the interesting spaces you're in. And there's some really great projects. But before we get into the projects, I really wanted to start with kind of this one question that I've kind of been thinking about, which is like, how do you describe yourself? And I say that like what's your purpose or what are you working toward? I ask because there are so many interesting projects you're working on, but they're also a little different. So I would say artist, storyteller, but I'd love to hear, how do you describe yourself?
Well, first of all, thanks for reposting all my stuff on the web and just generally being involved in what I'm creating and sharing with the world. That feels good to hear. Absolutely. And to be acknowledged in that way. And I share my passion and my energy through a lot of different mediums, but I feel like it's all about connection and vulnerability and authenticity. So whether that could be through like storytelling with Souls of Society, or that could be through Indigo Keys, which is a musical project I've been working on, or that I did with a couple of people last year, or it could be through, I've been doing sunrise sessions on Facebook Live for the past like 35 days or so, where I've just been sharing like my healing process through this winter time. And even though they're different mediums and like different forms of communication, I feel like it's all about trying to be transparent. And um, I think there was a time in my life when I was like interested in the idea of enlightenment as like some place I was trying to get to. And now I feel like I am interested in um, really being human and embodying the transcendent within my human being. And these are the different ways in which I call forth that energy.
And is it because I mean, I love all that. I guess my question is that for you or is it for you and others? Because the way that you express it really connects with so many people.
I really think it's the same thing, you know, like, I think to be aware of your authentic self is to be aware of and care for others, because you're not being pretentious in any way. And I feel like each person on this planet is unique for a certain reason. So if they embody their full uniqueness, then they are expressing a specific part of the universe that can't be expressed in any other way. And if you're doing it in like not an egoic place, but from a place of just self-love and self-worth, I feel like people inherently pick up on that without you having to say it. Mm-hmm. And then they have the space to be themselves also.
Yeah, I agree. How did you get to that place? Because so many, I chuckle because I think that there's so many people that are striving for that authentic self and looking, you know, people might get lost in those details of like what I do for a career or these sorts of things. And I think those things can maybe be connected because it's that about that expression or how you bring it forth. Has this been like a long-term journey for you to even say, yeah, that's what my aim is for?
I don't know if I always would have articulated it in that way, but you know, since I was little, I always had a desire to understand the world more, and I was always very inquisitive. And that was throughout school, and then specifically when I was in San Francisco and started doing the project, I was really like intensely walking the streets, asking people for kind of like insight and wisdom. And everyone is an expert on something. You know, like, I mean, we recognize people as experts when we go to their job and they're wearing a uniform that says like, I am the postman. So you feel comfortable asking them about like the mail and stuff like that. But if you can see past all that and just provide a space for people to express what they know, then people will tell you the most profound things. And the way I was picking those people to connect with while doing my project was just who I was attracted to, like in a like vibratory, like energetic way.
Yeah.
Because I believe everyone emits a certain frequency, like everything is a vibration. So we're naturally drawn to people when they're resonating in certain frequencies. And if they're resonant frequencies, then I found that there's usually some sort of information that we could share to assist each other in our journey. And I really think that's the mode of being that we're moving to as a species, because right now we operate in this very linear way where it's like, oh, I need to do these things. I need to achieve these statuses at this time in my life. And what I've tapped into is a deeper intuitive way of relating with my life, so that I'm just more guided and I give much more weight to my feelings, you know, and approach people based on those feelings and with a genuine sense of inquisitiveness. And if people can feel that you are like interested in them and that you don't want something from them, then they'll open up and just share, because everyone likes to be listened to, you know?
I agree. And it's because you are showing up like that they are doing that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about souls. So, you know, maybe a little bit of background. Maybe you could share with us, because I mean, you've been doing Souls of Society, I think, since 2011 when it started off as Souls of San Francisco, more of your street project, or street photography project.
Right.
So let me pause and maybe give us a little description of kind of what it is and how you've been doing it or how it started.
So I was in film school and I love filmmaking. I mean, I love all art forms. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, and my friend Brandon Stanton, who does Humans in New York, had just started that project, and we're from the same place in Georgia. So he had just started. We were sitting at a pool party one day, and I just, this is when maybe 300 people were following his project. And I just kind of could recognize it for what it was and the way it would be able to connect with people using social media. I just understood what it would become. So I was like, dude, I think that's awesome. I'll come and make a documentary about what you're doing and help get the word out about it. So I went to New York and visited him, and we just kind of hung out for a few days, and I was following him around and watching the process. And when I got back to San Francisco, I was like, oh, this is something that I would love to do here because I understand the framework of it, and you get to meet a lot of people. And that's when I started. And fortunately, he didn't want me to do Humans of San Francisco, which I think I originally proposed that idea to him, because he wanted his thing to be, differentiated and not necessarily affiliated. And this was before there were all the other Humans of projects. But what that forced me to do is think about that I wanted to do the same thing, but how would my project be different? And the name Souls of San Francisco came to me, which to me is a much better name than Humans of San Francisco. And it also speaks to the differences between what I'm doing and what he's doing, and the difference between San Francisco and New York. That's kind of the background of it, And I remember I would walk the streets, and one of the most memorable first experiences I had was taking a picture of this Yiddish man in North Beach. And it's a really beautiful photograph because I didn't really know how to use the camera when I first started using it. And I was using the manual setting and just trying out different things. And sometimes they were good and sometimes they weren't. And I took a picture of him, which was the first really great picture I felt like I had taken. And he had this really deep stillness about him, but he also seemed to be in motion. And the picture kind of looked like he was flying or vibrating. But there was a deep inner stillness. And after I took the picture, we started talking, and his apartment was right nearby. So he invited me up to his room, and the room was, maybe 4 feet by 9 feet. And it was there was the only thing in the room was a pull down bed and 3 bookshelves that were from the floor to the ceiling, and they had nothing but books about spirituality in them. And he was just telling me, he was like, well, you're doing this project. Maybe you can help me share this information. And he started talking to me about God and saying all these things that I didn't really understand, but I could feel that there was some sort of weight to them. And when I left that day, I was pretty intrigued by the interaction, and I wanted to recreate it. I was like, wow, you can go really deep with just a complete stranger, just from 0 to 100. So I started doing that and meeting people and seeing what information they had to share. And like I said, my intuitive abilities picked up, and my world started to become very magical in the sense that I would see somebody that I had never seen before, right? And I talked to them in one part of town, and then 2 days later I would see them in another part of town. When I would ask them a question about what was going on in their life, they would talk about what was going on in my life. And then they would say, and I would say that, I'd be like, wow, that's exactly what I'm kind of dealing with right now. And they'd say, oh yeah, well, you should read this book, and then I would read that book, and that would give me some insight and answers. So it became what I feel like is a direct conversation with spirit, in that spirit was speaking through these people to give me the guidance that I needed to move forward in my life. So everything that I've learned and everything that I am is from meeting all these different reflections of myself, out in the world.
It's so interesting. It's this connectivity in such a higher way. It makes me think about when I read about souls, going back in history a little bit before I knew about it. You refer to it more as like this project, and now I see it's really referred to as a movement. It seems to make sense to me, like as you talk about like the spirit or just this connection that you're making and that these individuals are making. Why call it a movement? Is this because I know you there's chapters and there's this idea of moving it forward, but I'm curious about like maybe what it's become over the last 5+ years, and what does that look like in the future?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So you mentioned that it was Souls of San Francisco to start,
Yeah.
and maybe 3 or 4 years in, somewhere around there, I changed it to Souls of Society because I was doing a lot of traveling, and I also got a hit that this could be. I didn't need to be the only storyteller, and this could exist in many cities where people were telling the stories of their own community in their own way. And that's what I mean for it to be a movement where people in other cities will be going out and just sharing the vibration of their community, because different people are going to pick different people to interact with. They're going to talk about different things. Even how they talk to each other, I feel like is very telling, like that's one thing about my project that I feel like is different maybe than art. One thing about my project, the way I like to do it is just that I'm interested in all the details, like how a person talks, what they talk about. Like I'm not trying to shorten it to a soundbite necessarily. Like it's not supposed to be entertainment. It can be entertaining, but it's more about understanding and empathy and almost like getting in that person's wavelength to understand the way that they see the world. Because I feel like you become more intelligent if you're able to stand in someone else's perspective and recognize that we essentially all want the same things, regardless of the shell that we're encased in. So I feel like I've learned more in the last 5 years by interacting with people in this way than I have at any other period in my life. So I feel like it's an opportunity for other people to have that same awakening and learning, by doing this quote unquote storytelling. That's one way to think about it, but it's much bigger than that. And one thing that became really profound, and I'm looking at the picture right now, it's in my living room, blown up like 3 by 4 feet, is a good friend of mine, passed in a car accident 2 4th of Julys ago. And the pictures that I took of him for Souls of San Francisco were the pictures that were used at his memorial service. And I remember when I took the packaging off of the picture, his dad saw it and almost passed out, just because the energy of his son was like encased in the picture. When I look at it now, it's like vibrating, and it's just it's a tremendous portal, into another dimension. Like if you just stare at it, you start to trance out. And I realized even more than just these passing moments that people are looking at on Facebook or whatever, it has the potential to become this huge database, right? Like literally of souls and the information that they carry. So my vision is that once there are more storytellers, let's say there's 100 or 1,000 other storytellers in 1,000 different cities around the world. And I've been doing this for 5 years, and I've taken over 5,000 pictures. So do the math for that, and how many people you're connecting with, and how many stories that you're sharing, and how much energy from people you're sharing. And it's just, I don't know, it's just mind blowing to me. So you can go on the site and cross-reference all these different ways to search through people and community. You can search by name. You can say, I want to see everything that Dijon's done and look at all the stuff I've done. Or I want to see all the stuff in Atlanta, or I want to see all the stories about death, or any combination of those cross references to just see the human organism from all of these different perspectives. And another major part of the evolution is to make souls sustainable. And I've been doing it as a passion project and have figured out some ways to monetize the offering by people hiring me to do photo shoots or doing some branded storytelling where I spotlight organizations that I'm aligned with. But I would like to be able to bring on or other storytellers and photographers to co-create this movement. And I would like to be able to pay them to do that. So I'm on Patreon now, which is a great way to support artists and art projects. And my vision was to have these other storytellers kind of have specialized projects that they're working on. Like I have a friend, Christina, who just went to Mexico City, and she got kind of in touch with her Latino heritage. So she wants to do a set of 10 stories on the Latino community in the Bay. So for instance, she would say, hey, I'm doing these stories. I'd like to raise $1,000 to tell the stories of these communities. And like that way, each of the storytellers can focus on raising money to share their community. And I think at this point, with how big Souls has become, people understand there's a lot of value in a lot of different ways from that type of project.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see that. And I have seen your Patreon, so I could see where it could go. Do you think as moving to a sustainable, approach to this, do you think that will evolve or shape society or souls a little bit differently at all? Because here's the reason I ask. When you mentioned your friend and her doing maybe like a 10-part series, I could see where this could also be, it's not just on the street interviews or these photos, but it could also be maybe different niches of stories. Do you see any sort of like change or evolution in that way?
I'm sorry, you said different what kind of stories?
Like maybe a different angle to the story. Maybe it's not just the person on the street, but it's taking like a deeper dive or a different kind of docu-style, or I imagine it's the same essence of what you guys would aim for, even if it would grow to bigger, more cities. But would it change maybe, or different ways to tell the stories?
Oh, totally. I mean, I'm not attached to one specific way. I mean, it started synchronistically on the street, but now it's a lot of times people want to participate in the project. So I'll go connect with somebody who I'm either interested in or they're interested to be a part of the project. And we do it that way. And some of the branded storytelling that I've done has been with like an organization called Josephine, for instance, which is a startup based in Oakland. And it's sort of similar to Airbnb in the sense that it's connecting you with neighbors, but instead of renting out their space, these neighbors are making home-cooked meals. So you could like look around your neighborhood or your city and see people making home-cooked meals, which you could then go and pick up from these people. So it's just a different way to connect community. And I'm friends with somebody who works at that organization, and they wanted to collaborate in some way. And I said, well, my work is all about people, and what they do is kind of secondary, but it does seem relevant to know more about these people because, you're going to be eating the food that they create. And I feel like energy is able to be transferred in basically any way, but especially when someone's cooking your food, like you're really taking in that person's energy. So what better way to kind of advertise for the people and also get other people invested in the community and just to get to know those people. And they all had different stories about how they came to doing what they're doing and what their paths have been. So that was an example of kind of, it's not as random like on the street because I was actually going to these people's houses and connecting with them. But an example of just like spotlighting a specific section of a community and then telling those stories. So that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, I could see how this could get really different legs and go in different ways. You mentioned community a couple times, and that is absolutely, I could see this building community. When I first thought about souls, I started to really think about this as an individual, because this was you starting this and you were connecting with individuals. And then that individual that you were meeting, they were also having an experience, right? They were growing and they were connecting in a different way. Do you see this as it gets larger and as it branches out in more cities and different areas, that it's really a community builder versus it's not just the individual, but it actually has, I think, traction to create communities where they didn't exist before?
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, I've definitely created a community in San Francisco of people that know me and understand the value of the project. One of my favorite moments in this project was when I was going through a specific part of my healing path, because I'm pretty open about what's going on in my life. And one thing that maybe is different about the way I do it and the way like Humans of New York is done, for instance, is my voice is in it. You know, like I have a conversation with somebody and it's like I ask them a question and they answer. And then I ask them another question, or I say like how that is pertinent to me. And the reason why I do it that way is because I feel like truth is something that's discovered relationally a lot of the time when you're dealing with human beings. You know, like people don't necessarily have the wherewithal just to say, here's my story from point A to point B, and these are all the things that I've learned. It's like a mutual holding of vulnerability that allows you to access those places that you wouldn't be able to get to on your own. And the other aspect of that is I want people to be very clear that this is a subjective experience that I'm having. Like it's not a documentary. I'm not a documentarian. I'm not trying to claim this is objective. This is my experience of the world. And at this point, that's really all people have seen. But if these 1,000 storytellers were all sharing their subjective experience, I think that's really interesting, you know?
Absolutely. I do too. Actually, I really love that you do it that way. I very much caught on that you are having a conversation. I think it hits home for me too, because I'm sure you have figured out that is a little bit of my style.
Right.
And for me, it almost humanizes it a little bit. When I read the post and I read about the individual that you're talking to, but I can also see this relation. I'm like, oh yeah, I would have asked that, or I don't know. It is really interesting the way that you've done that. I'm really curious because you've done it for so long too, and I know that it's evolved and changed, but how do you stay inspired still? Or what keeps you kind of inspired to continue to connect and tell those stories? Or maybe a better version of that is, how has the journey inspired you differently to continue it?
That's a good question, because it has been difficult at times to keep it going, because it has been in a lot of ways very solitary. And I've definitely gotten burnt out a few times, and that's invited me to shift the way I show up. And a lot of it is like, I feel like there's been enough reflections just like this one where someone's reaching out and saying they're interested in this. And, you know, like this is energizing me about the project, and people write me messages almost every day saying that it's touched them in some way. Because for me personally, like I've always loved music and I love lots of art forms. So I'm starting to feel more called to express myself in other ways. But I feel like I need to pass off the baton and stay with it until it has legs as a community movement and not just something that would stop with me, because I don't think it's that way. I think the story I was telling earlier was that, like, as the community was growing, and more people would come, sometimes when there would be big swarms of people, like the tone of the community would shift a little bit, and maybe people would be somewhat antagonistic to other people, and I would just have to check people and be like, yo, like, that's not what we're doing here. Like, we're not here to make fun of anyone or make people feel unsafe and expressing their vulnerability. So if you want to do that, go somewhere else. And I remember at a specific moment when I was sharing my healing stuff, and it was just a very emotional post. And some guy wrote like, "Hey dude, like I like your pictures, but sometimes you get off on these esoteric tangents, or you talk about yourself, and like I just don't think that anyone wants to hear that, or like blah blah blah." And before I could even respond to it, someone else responded, and they were like, "I personally am very interested in what Dijon has to say, and that's not the community like vibration that we're holding here. And if you don't like it, then you need to go somewhere else. The world doesn't exist to entertain you." And that like helped me to understand that like it had become something that was bigger than me. It was a place that other people valued as informative or safe or healing or expansive in some way, and that they were willing to protect it and speak their truth about it. And that felt really good. So now I'm just in the process of wanting to serve the community that already exists and make sure that it can live on, even if I start to step away from it more.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know what? It's interesting when you said that and you described that story with that gentleman making that comment. By you actually sharing, what you think and in this healing, it goes back to your earlier point. You're just being authentic. You're being yourself. And that was the point of this, was to be authentic and connect with other people. And so it wouldn't just be the story of people in a picture. Otherwise, like we could see that somewhere else.
Right.
It is interesting that it truly has become a community on its own. But the community also sounds like it's still really true to the reason you started it. And that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for that. It's very humbling. A filmmaker just showed me a cut of a documentary she'd been working on for almost 18 months about the project. And she'll probably have a screening of it somewhere in San Francisco in February. But it was really beautiful to look back on the history of the project and all the people, because I meet so many people that I don't necessarily like cognitively remember all of these interactions. Just like they're not at the top of my mind because I can't keep that many things in my mind.
Sure.
I mean, if you were to show me someone's picture, then I could tell you like where I took their picture and what we talked about. But just randomly, I can't remember all these things. But she told a story of not only me and the project, but it was kind of an ensemble piece where she was focusing on the stories of these people that I had featured and what their lives are like and how the project affected them. And it was really powerful. It's very humbling because I realized that I've been working in service to something much bigger than me for a long time. And sometimes my understanding expands to catch up a little bit. But whatever it is that's guiding me it's like, got this, like it's happening for all of us.
Even by watching that too, was it just also a great reminder of this in service that you've been doing? Like maybe not a wake up call, but more of a, wow, this is actually a little bigger than I remember. Like, look at how much, not what I've done, but look at how much has happened.
Yeah, definitely. Like when I think about myself now, I don't identify as the Souls of San Francisco person in the way that I used to, because I've been focusing on music. So
yeah,
like Indigo Keys was more, and even that was last year. So it's like I started making music with some other people. So I'm focused more on evolving, and that's even like in the way I dress. Like I have these 2 psychedelic sweaters I used to always wear when I would go out and take pictures that were kind of like my uniform. And it was also just like being in that mindset. And I'm definitely in a different mindset now, even though the project is still going on. So it's a reminder that this is a huge part of my identity and like what I've contributed to the world. And it makes me feel good. I feel like if I were to die today, I contributed something to humanity.
I think that's so important. I mean, obviously that's how we should probably all feel toward the end there. And I think something I was thinking about as you were talking about, just watching that clip and why I asked that question, I think a lot of times we're so close to whatever we're doing that we don't always realize maybe the impact that something's happening, or maybe even your impact in what we're doing. So it's sometimes a nice reminder to kind of step back or have somebody help us see something in a different filter.
Totally.
Well, you mentioned music, and actually it's a perfect segue because I do want to talk about some of that too. Yeah, because like we were talking earlier, I've listened to some of your music. We had some conversation about that. So let's talk about Indigo Keys too, specifically around. Obviously, you're a musician. You connect. I think you do a handful of things. Really, it's not just like you're just one instrument. It's really about the entire connection of creating music, what it means. So let's talk about. I guess it was last year. Was Indigo Keys is a band that you've been part of. There was 3 of you, I believe. So tell me more about maybe about Indigo Keys, and like you said, maybe it's on to another gig or another group of people that you're making music with.
Yeah, so I feel like the story starts in Hawaii in February of 2015. And I was in Maui, and I was getting a tarot reading. And the woman said, "What would you like to know about?" And I told her, I'm a romantic, so I told her I would like to know when I'm going to meet my next soulmate. And she asked me, did I want to know about my soulmate or my twin flame? And I was like, well, what does that mean? And she said, your soulmate is, you have a contract with them, and you have like a deep resonance, and the twin flame is the embodiment of the other half of your soul. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. Like, I want to know about that.
Yeah, sure.
and so she started telling me about this woman that I would meet in May of 2015. And, I was drawing cards about when I would meet her and what she would look like and all these things. And she was supposed to have blonde hair and blue eyes and all of these things. And I had never dated anyone like that. So I was like, okay, sure, whatever. And then in May of 2015, I saw this woman in a tea house that I went to that I thought was really attractive, and not just in the physical sense, but more like in an energetic attraction. And but she was sitting with somebody, so I didn't say anything to her. I just like went about my way. And maybe a week after that, she wrote me a message on Facebook, and she said, "Hey, I'm looking to get some pictures taken, and people say that you're a person to do that. You take good portraits." And I said, "Yeah, I do. That sounds good. Would you like to come over for dinner at my house for a dinner party?" Because to me, it was like already kind of going towards this like prophecy storyline. Like I could feel that connection. And also I had been told I would meet somebody, with that sort of energetic resonance that looked like her. So I was curious, and I had people over, and she came over, and we didn't even talk that much, but there was a lot of energy between us. And when I was hugging her goodbye that night, it was just like, it's just one of those feelings, I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced that type of soul, like vibrating resonance with somebody, but it was very powerful. And the next time we went out, we were having dinner and looking each other in the eyes, and we went outside. We felt like we were on mushrooms, we were just in like an alternate universe. We were intimately connected for a year and a half, and it was an incredibly powerful, transformative experience that I'm actually now kind of trying to rebalance myself from. But what I now understand about the twin flame connection is that whereas a soulmate can be like your partner, and you have like a feeling of like home with them, like their skin smells good, and it just is, you're at ease with them. Your twin flame, you have this really intense desire for union, like the deepest union possible. And yet that union is blocked by all the ways in which you haven't healed yet. So any shit that you have whether it's like with your family or with your dad. Like I had some stuff with my dad or whatever. And that whatever the blocks are to love, those become the blocks in your connection in that relationship. So at our levels of awareness, when we met, we had this desire to connect, but then there were also these things keeping us from really being in like true harmony. And as we've been in relationship, it's been intoxicating and excruciating and expansive and humbling and just all the things, like my ability to experience life has definitely expanded in all directions. And this year, or I guess last year, because it's 2017 now, but about a year after we had been in a relationship, we started making music together. And the first song we made was a song called Close to You, which is number 6 on the album. Mm-hmm. And it was just a really beautiful, powerful song. And we made it in like 3 hours. And I had never played really keyboards or anything before. And we were just kind of channeling these musical expressions. And the song is really beautiful because it's like light and dark, like there's points when you hear like a didgeridoo sound that,
yes,
that like stimulates like your gut, like where your emotions kind of lie. And there are other parts that are like hyper melodic and in these high realms. And I feel like it really exemplified our dynamic, and because it was all of those things at once. And usually things are one or the other, they're usually either heavy or light, it's either pop music or like something else. And it was just deeper than that. And
how did you guys go from this intoxicating relationship to, wanting to take portraits, to making music together? Is that part of that kind of that connection of you just want to be so close and so intimate in so many ways? Like, was it just this, hey, you both, first of all, did you both have a natural, desire to make music? And was it just this thing like, hey, we could do something so interesting and connective together? Like, yeah, how's that bridge into that?
Well, so for the pictures, when we retell the stories, I tell it the way I just told it. And she says she was just genuinely interested in the pictures. So that's, it's obviously this is from my perspective. But we have a big age difference. I'm 34 now and she's 25. When we met, I guess I was 32 and she was 23. But I have been like on my creative expression path for a while, so it's very natural to me. And I feel like when we met, she was exploring herself. She's getting to know herself. She's a different point in her life, but she has an amazing voice. I mean, as you heard on the album,
yeah, she's
just an incredibly gifted singer. So, and she's just a beautiful human being, like in all ways. And she would often make these little Facebook videos, of her singing or stuff on Instagram or her playing her little ukulele. But she wasn't taking it like very seriously, like she wasn't kind of like owning her power. And I think that's maybe something that would have come naturally, but seeing as I was someone who was creating and outputting every day, and like I was like, hey, like you could really do something with this. You could take this seriously and like you could make a living doing this, like this is a tremendous gift that you're sitting on. So I was kind of pushing her to take it more seriously. And eventually I started accompanying her, like playing guitar or playing ukulele so that she could just sing. And it would also encourage her to take what she was doing with more weight. Like I would have art shows, like Souls of San Francisco art shows, then be like, and we're going to play music at the end of it together. So we started doing that. And a friend of ours who's a mutual friend, would like film the performances, and some of those are on the Souls of Society website. It's like Dijon and Annie. I don't know if you've seen those or not.
No, I haven't seen those yet.
Yeah, they're cute. They're like pre-Indigo Keys stuff, like our little acoustic, our folk songs, and our friend Craig would record those videos. So Craig had always wanted to play music, and he had been tried to be in bands before and stuff like that. So he was like, "Hey, I've got this keyboard and like this beat pad and this drum kit and all these guitars. Like maybe I could bring him over sometime, and we could play with them." So one day he brought them over to my house, and we literally watched YouTube videos to understand how to use GarageBand with his equipment.
That's brilliant.
And we plugged it in, and the first thing I did when I picked up the beat pad was the drum beat for "Close to You." You know, they're like dun 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 dun, like that thing. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And then I just gave it to him, and I was like, now you do something. And he was like, well, what should I do? And I was like, I don't know, you do it. And that's kind of how our creativity worked, is like we would just be creative and just explore things and the different sounds and just start playing things until we saw something that was good and then build on that. So we made the music, and Annie came home and came into the house, and she was like, oh, this sounds cool. Like I want to sing on this. And where we were at in our relationship, we were sharing space, and that we were like living together just because the circumstances worked out for that month. But we weren't technically dating. It was one of those silly things. But so she was in a place of like wanting to reconnect at that time. And within 10 minutes, she was like, okay, I've got it. The song is called "Close to You." And she sang that song, like looking me in the eyes. Like she looked me in the eyes and sang that song. And it was just really powerful and profound and beautiful. And I was like, well, we've got something special here. Like, let's make a whole album about our relationship. And this is like kind of the heart of it. And then we'll build parts around it and take people on a whole journey of what it's been like, what this connection has been like. And that's what we did.
That's fascinating. I have to tell you, just, you know, like I told you, I'd listened to it once so far, but also I think I've spoken to so many people that, you know, live kind of in the arts, and they've talked about the creative process. You have described a creative process that I have not heard of yet. It is usually like they're so dedicated, like I'm a musician and I'm going to do this thing and I'm writing music and I spend this time, versus, hey, so this guy showed up with, you know, some different random instruments. We watched a YouTube video about GarageBand. That seems so organic to not focus so hard on we have to create something, but more about let's just create something that feels right.
Right.
That's so interesting. Does it still kind of work that way now for you, knowing that maybe there's this, you know, change in who you're making music with and what you're doing, but does it still feel like it's still organic in that way where you're like, you try something now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm still making music with Craig, who I named Keys, after we were playing together. So I'm still making music with Keys, and we were making some songs with a different singer this weekend, like over New Year's. And also I was recording music with other people in Oakland where I was being the vocalist, and that turned out really well. And I also just got Ableton, so I was playing with that software with somebody. So for me, it's not about really how you're doing it. It's about the feeling of the energy you create. So that goes for, like I said, all the different art forms. You know, it doesn't just have to be music or photography. It's about creating a certain feeling.
How does that connect to, well, here's my question. I've been thinking about, like, is, because it's two different mediums, right? And you talked earlier about this expression and things that you could do, and this connection, probably my words, but, you know, from Souls, this kind of quote unquote storytelling, you know, this connection to other people, to music is really such a big vibe for you now. How does that, like, is there a linear line that connects them for you, that it's really just another way of maybe, probably being authentic to yourself, but how's that, like, I guess, that evolution look like for you, or what's the bridge
from the storytelling to the music?
Yeah, like why music now, I guess? Why that versus the photography and the filmmaking that you also do enjoy?
I mean, I think music has always been my like deepest passion, like I never wanted to be a photographer. I don't even really identify as a photographer now, like I don't take pictures of anything except for people. And I only take pictures of people so that I can talk to them.
So it's just the medium. It's not even really that art that you're looking for.
Right. I mean, I consider what I'm doing art, but the real art is my interaction with the people.
Sure.
Right? Like you can see on their face that they feel seen and that they feel comfortable, right? Like a lot of people could technically take a beautiful photograph, a beautiful portrait, but not everyone can stop a stranger on the street and make them feel or help them to feel like loved and help them to be open, in 30 seconds, right? Like that's a different thing. And for me, like whether it's music or photography, it's really all about my connection to source energy and channeling energy through me into whatever it is that I'm doing. So I don't get too fixated on what it is that I'm doing. Like I put that much energy into the food I cook.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's just how I live my life. And the more wisdom I get from the experience that I have, the more I learn how to open myself to that flow of energy, and the more it flows through me.
Is this more also in the moment versus knowing where you're going next? And I don't mean to say like you don't have an idea, like, hey, I want to produce these things or do whatever you want to do. But it really does sound like you really focus on the moment of what you're creating or what's in front of you, versus like, I need a 10-year plan to create something or create this mission. Maybe there's some of that bigger vision with Souls, but it sounds a little like, yeah, you're really like in the now, in the present. Is that true?
Yeah, I do my best, like I feel like that's when I create the best things, is when I'm really being present. I think with the project or with my relationship or with anything, when I have too strong of an attachment on the story of what I think it's supposed to be or where I think it has to go, that's when things become difficult, that's when things become heavy.
I asked this specifically too, because I think what you just said made a lot of sense. And so many people that I've chatted with, just throughout life, they may be so focused on the narrative of what they are aiming for versus also maybe some of the now that can shape that narrative.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's all about the now, like the more you lean into the now and follow your highest excitement and get in touch with your feelings, the more beautiful life becomes. That's my experience. And it's just moving away from the mind, over identification with the mind and the ego, and recognizing. And that's why I said it's so important for everyone to be themselves, because your instinct knows what to do. Your mind is what starts to rationalize things or try to, and your mind should be working for your heart, not the other way around.
I love that. You're so right. We get in our own way when it comes to that.
Yeah, tell me about it. I know all about it.
It's funny. I feel like we could have a little therapy session here. I'm like, I'm just going to keep asking you questions. I'm going to make them personal now. No, this is really smart, though. I love it. Even though we've talked about in the now, what is kind of next for you? You're talking about making, more music. So is that really kind of like your next, maybe, do you consider it a project or just like this is your passion, maybe another album coming out down the road?
I mean, I definitely would like to make music my life in the sense that people pay me to make music.
Yeah.
And really, I would love to be paid just to be creative, like,
Absolutely.
like
I totally vibe with that.
right. And it's like, I hope that people understand my vibe enough to see that, to me, it's not like it's not just in a vacuum, right? Like the things I like to create, I really think have value for everyone. So I'm just trying to figure out how to get support to take these ideas even further, with Souls and with my own musical exploration, because we've had these listening parties, our live performances, and people, especially people in relationship, I've seen them like cry through the whole album, or have spontaneous kind of like realizations after listening to it, or just be like really deeply moved that people can understand and kind of show the emotional intensity and density that they've been working through in a really beautiful way, and by transmuting our own struggle into this beautiful art form, it kind of does that for everyone. It's like we access the universal through the personal.
Yeah. What advice would you offer to somebody who is maybe on like the same side that you're on, where they want to, they really want to pursue, maybe it's music or it's arts or it's whatever the case is. But there's a reason I ask this, because I think it's different than kind of your like air quote standard job, like being paid for these sorts of things. And I think it can become very discouraged if somebody, like, you're working on a project and you're still not making ends meet, maybe. Do you, and you've been doing stuff like this for a while. Do you have kind of even maybe some words of wisdom of how to keep going when maybe you're not quite there yet?
I think it's to have faith, and try to give to other people. Like, I don't think about myself as like taking people's picture. It's more about like giving them my presence. It's like I give them my presence, I listen to them, and then I take their wisdom and the way I see them, which is usually in a high, beautiful light. And then I reflect that to them, and not only to them, but to the world. And then the community can say, oh, like, I love this person. They have beautiful things to say. I like the picture on Facebook. And that gives them energy. So it's figuring out a way to use your gifts in service. And if you use your gifts in service and are supporting people, then people will support you.
I love that. And it also made me think about what you said earlier when you talked about how, when people write you every day and there's maybe a great anecdote or story that energizes you, it's very similar, I would imagine, too, or maybe that's the result of it. Even, that's how they support you. They can even support you, maybe not even doing something directly, but they can energize you if you are using your gifts for service.
Totally. And I definitely get energy, just like I said, from like this call, or and it's also like shifting my idea of what I need, someone gave me a new definition for abundance the other day, because I live in San Francisco, which is one of the most expensive places to live in the United States, maybe the most expensive place to live in the United States. So I figured out a way to like survive here, but I'm not like balling, it's still something I have to put a lot of energy to each month just to figure out how to make it work. But someone's definition of abundance was the ability to do what you need to do when you need to do it. And that helped me to really think about my situation in a different way, because I was like, man, I really do have everything that I need, and I get to live this lifestyle of creativity and expression, and people see me that way, and they see me as someone who contributes to the community through my creativity. And like, that's a blessing, like that's my job. Like, what more can you ask for really than that? I think that we get fed these ideas about what wealth is, and a lot of it is tied to like actual literal money, but like wealth is a number of things, so you can redefine what that is for yourself.
Yeah. And I love that definition of abundance. When you said it, I would have never described it that way. It's actually super helpful because it's also, just it's kind of looking at it with a different lens.
Yeah, totally.
This is great. I love, like I said, I've loved all the stuff you've done with Souls, and I just recently listened to your album. And your album didn't, if I'm not mistaken, it just came out. Is that right?
Yeah, it came out November 11th.
Yeah, so not too long. And what's the name of the album?
It's called Journey to Arcturus.
And that's available to like on, I would imagine, like Apple Music, Spotify, those sort of places?
Yeah, all those places. Bandcamp if you want to pay us instead of paying those companies. But SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Music, all of that.
Perfect. Well, Dijon, this has actually been really, really terrific. Like, I was so curious about kind of walking through where Souls was, and then because I knew that you were doing this music, and I really was interested in like what was next for you, because I can tell you were like just about creative and wanted to show it in different places. So thank you for just telling us the stories and sharing kind of your journey.
Yeah, thank you so much for being interested and having me on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. The one last question I'll end with is, if people want to find you online, now that could either be you, Souls, or even the music that you're making, what's the best places that we should point some people?
So I should do a better job of making this all in one place. But for Souls, the website is soulsofsociety.com. The music is indigokeysmusic.com. And my personal website, which I probably put the least energy into, is dijonsdimension.com.
We'll link to all of those too, so it's easy on the show notes and also on the website. So they'll find it all there.
Great.
Well, this is awesome. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm very grateful.
So what did you think? Any new ideas? Are you going to try something new? I'm always left with ideas and feeling great after these conversations. These guests really energize me. If you want to share your thoughts about the guest or how the show sparked a new idea, I'd love to hear it. You can actually call me and leave me a message at 1-707-347-9312. That's 1-707-347-9312. Just include your name in a brief message, and you may even be featured on a future show. If you want to follow along with me and see behind-the-scenes fun and my adventures, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at @MeChristopher. That's MECHRISTOPHER. You can also follow along with Accidental Information on Instagram and Facebook at Accidental Information, and on Twitter at Accidental Info. Also, we publish original articles weekly about following your passions, getting creative, and a lot more, all at accidentalinformation.com. Lastly, if you love the show and you want to spread the goodness around, go tell a friend about it. As in, literally text someone or email it to them. I'd love it. Also, please make sure you're subscribed to receive new episodes automatically each week. Thanks again for joining the conversation. Okay, that's it. We'll talk again next week.